It's a pleasant Monday morning, and today, the 10th of June 2024. Welcome to your morning program, The Dailies, where we keep you up to date with all that is happening. From the front page of our paper, where we are seeing that the talk of minimum wage is still getting hot, where we are seeing Labour is suggesting 250,000, and we are seeing that the committee actually suggested 62,000 naira. So right now, we're just waiting for what the president is going to say concerning this, and hopefully, maybe, just maybe, the talk will end today concerning how much the new minimum wage will be. I am Sarah Elisha Dashon. Remember, you can be part of the program by joining us via Facebook. Drop your comment, your views on this story and many others that we shall be discussing in the show today. I will be doing the program alongside Rachel Tanzi.
It was fine. How was yours?
It was great. Thank you so much. All right, we shall run through the papers and start this paper.
The big story on Daily Sun: minimum wage, Labour adamant on 250,000 naira. Says Tinubu's response will determine next step. Details can be found on page 6. Constitution review reps small creation of new states. Receive 14 proposals. Lawmakers groups demand Olu Okun, Katagum, Ibadan states. You can find details on page 6. War against drugs. NDLEA intercepts codeine shipment from India to US, UK in ladies' hair. You can find details on page 4. 5 dead as 3-story building collapses in Abia. See, Frenchman Northern Group threatens to shut down Nigeria over unjust exercise. ASU shifts proposed strike mandates branches to mobilize members. Details can be found on page 29. Nigeria's trade surplus rises to 6.52 trillion naira in the first quarter, a report from the Bureau of Statistics. Details can be found on page 25. Tinubu appoints 29-year-old Madukwe DG National Council on Climate Change. You can find details on page 26. And on open grazing, NEF calls for establishment of National Pastoralist Commission. And I take that again. NEF calls for establishment of National Pastoralist Commission. You can find details on page 6. IPOB disowns alleged referendum plan in Southeast. Details can be found on page 27. And on Israeli-Gaza crisis, federal government calls for urgent global action to de-escalate conflict. Details can be found on page 28. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Laurel Paris announces multi-talented Temi Utitola new ambassador for Africa, with the writer saying actress is the first Nigerian to represent iconic beauty brand. More detail of that can be found on page 5. Wando announces $550 million participation in NNPCL crude oil bag Gazelle. Detail found on page 5. Tinubu approves new leadership for National Council on Climate Change. Nigeria, 7 other nations demand immediate halt of arms supply to Israel, with the writer Africa's most populous country backs Biden ceasefire proposal, and then Israeli forces rescue 4 hostages in Gaza. Detail of the international story can be found on page 5. And on the issue of the minimum wage, Bagodu says 62,000 naira recommended wage is on economic realities, with the writer governors say to 40% retrenchments, and then disclose only 10 subnational government can afford the new salary structure. Detail of that can be found in the paper. We have the pictures where we can see Temi Utitola making Nigeria proud with the product that she will be the ambassador for. And that's all in this day newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Tinubu immensely benefited from my goodwill, Atiku replies Shetima. EU earns 3.4 million euros from rejected Nigerian Schengen visa application. Labour challenges governors over minimum wage impasse. NPFL chaos erupts in title deciding Oriental Derby as he holds game. Serap sues Tinubu government over loan transparency. The big story admits military claims of victory. ISWAP holds public meetings in Borno, recruiting new members proposing separate Islamic country. On minimum wage, Father Mbaka calls for equality, says governors lawmakers should earn 62,000 naira. Joint security operation bust May 1 million kidnapper syndicate in Abuja. In retaliation to soldiers killing, army raids IPOB camp in Abia neutralizes 6. Scrap Senate to cut costs, Aisha Yusufu tells the federal government. Then we have a picture story. Lagos State Governor Sanwo-Olu commissions CKD plant at Dangote Sinotruk West Africa Limited, Ikeja, Lagos. And that's all the news on First Newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the rising cost of borrowing, economy in throes of credit squeeze, shed 7.1 trillion naira in 3 months, where we can see the interest rate, the bank's recapitalization, and all of these, how much of weight borrowing is putting on our currency. So you can do well to read more detail of the implication of that on the economy. Lagos AG asked the court to discontinue 1.35 billion naira EFCC case. Custom generates 1.09 billion naira in 90 days from vehicle re-regularization. ILO conference may stall minimum wage talk as leaders jet out of the country. Export naira depreciation put Nigeria's trade surplus to 6.5 trillion naira. Northern elders fault lawmakers offer solution to open grazing. You can find that as well in the paper. Kanu declares emergency on education, says 4.7 million people sit on bare floor. Kanu declares emergency on education, says 4.7 million people sit on bare floor. You can read that on page 29. Coalition tells Obi to accept 2023 election outcome. You can find what they have to say about that on page 3, and that's all on Guardian newspaper.
On Daily News Hub, furore over VP Shetima's 21 billion new official mansion. As Serap, other Nigerians raise eyebrows, declare project wasteful and misplaced priority. Obasanjo Buhari orders loans details, Serap drags Tinubu to court. Jonathan Odili Omeachi no longer in talking terms with Wike. Statement from Clark says he draws responsible city minister's political rise. Atiku replies, Shetima says Tinubu benefited immensely from my goodwill. Nigeria recorded 6.5 trillion naira trade surplus in the first quarter of 2024. On minimum wage, senators reps should also earn 62,000 naira. This is a suggestion from Mbaka. On Olubadan, Ibadan, indigents tackle Makinde over comment on Olakunleyi. On Eid el-Kabir, Bauchi residents lament hike in ram prices as Lagosians worry over soaring beans price. Court jails immigration officer 7 years for passport fraud. EU earned 3.4 million euros from rejected Schengen visa application from Nigeria. Still on Daily News Hub, Governor Obaseki and Benin monarchs set to clash over group's ban as state government warns we won't spare anyone caught, no matter how highly placed. Step-by-step guide on how to perform Hajj. You can find details inside the paper, and that's all the news on Daily News Hub.
On Vanguard newspaper, financial crisis. Discos pay 21.9 billion naira for 235 billion naira worth of Greek electricity. More detail on page 9. And on FS, prices skyrocket, distort travel plans. And Clark is saying how Jonathan, wife, and others force Wiki on Rivers. And on Monday interview here, we're seeing how our agri-revolution is delivering dividend by Governor Makinde. That's coming from Oyo State. You can read more detail of how they achieved that and for other states that will also want to key into the agri-revolution. Here we're seeing National Assembly delegation visit Dangote Refinery. We can see picture stories of those who were present during that. And the biggest story here says experts see danger around minimum wage battle with the rider. President, National Assembly will determine our next action, coming from Labour. alleges conspiracy between governors and operational private sector. And we have ITUC writes a power bill for labeling strike as act of economic sabotage. Governors, senators, reps should earn 62,000 naira minimum wage coming from Fada Mbaka. More detail of all the story can be found on page 5. And on basic education, why UBE Act must be reviewed coming from Senate, UPEC boss and others. More detail on page 8. Obi mocks INEC. South Africa election didn't experience glitches. You can find that on page 8. Gunmen abduct 30 passengers in Nasarawa State as bandit attack Catholic Church in Kaduna, abduct a priest. You can find that on page 6. And on sport, Benin versus Nigeria, it's win or bust for Super Eagles. You can find more detail of that as well. We have a column as well here, which you can find on page 16. And that's all on the Vanguard newspaper. But reach out to hear your own view. The experts see danger around the minimum wage battle. We're already having different views coming up. I mean, during the weekend was when I saw the 62,000 naira that was being suggested, because they had a meeting on Friday. So it was that meeting that brought the issue of the 62,000 naira, where the committee said they are done. And if my memory will serve me right, we never heard anything coming from the committee. All the while it was between the government and Labour. Labour saying this is what we want, and eventually we're seeing the committee came up with 62,000. And now I am waiting. Is it the committee that gave, because Wale Edu is supposed to give a template to the president of what it is, and right now we're seeing that what the president decides is what it's going to be. So we do not know what is on that template that will be given to the president. But already we're seeing danger. People are hoping that today will be the end of the back and forth. Already we're even seeing ASU is also shifting its own proposed strike. Let us see what the new minimum wage will be. Even though theirs is another different thing, still together with arrears, some allowances and all of that. But experts are sensing danger. And as it is present, we're already seeing, we saw what Akume said about the fact that because of the Greek laws, that was treasonable. And as well, we are seeing the Senate also, the Senate president also saying the fact that that was an economic sabotage or something of that nature. So we've said this, and we cannot overflow the issue of this minimum wage, but we cannot help it. That is what is happening in the nation presently. So what's your own view concerning this whole back and forth concerning the minimum wage? Already we're seeing what Father Mbaka is saying. You know what, if you're saying 62,000 naira, let everybody be earning 62,000 naira.
So a genuine expert knows that there's no danger. We're not talking about 1 million. The Nigerian government can pay minimum wage above 100,000, even 200,000, and there's no danger whatsoever. So I wish we could see these experts, but the paper just have a way of saying experts. And I might be speculating because there's never a name of an expert. Precisely who is this expert that is saying is danger? We've seen a lot of content being sponsored by the federal government, is media. We see content, we see propaganda, we see information, and you know that this is sponsored by the government at whatsoever level. And this expert could be sponsored by the federal government or by the government entirely, except if it's an independent expert coming out saying, I've done this research, I've done this survey, I've put these statistics together, I have done this, and that. This is what we need to see from experts. And we're yet to see that kind of breakdown from any expert whatsoever. Just a vague statement, expert sense danger. What danger? Come out and tell us what is the danger. Come and say, based on Nigerian revenue generation, based on tax, based on this, we're currently at 80 trillion deficit when it comes to our debt profile and all of that, and say based on our budget, based on this is how experts operate. This is how much the Nigerian government can pay as minimum wage. Not just a vague, ambiguous statement. You're sensing danger where and how, on what minimum wage, because at 62,000 there is no danger. At 100,000, there's no danger selling. At 200,000, there's no danger whatsoever. What we are having is the Nigerian government that are not willing to be selfless, because in the end of the day, This is going to affect every other expenditure, but someone needs more going into their own pocket, and they cannot risk that for the common Nigerian, as far as I'm concerned. So when experts are talking, I want to see an expert that is truly an expert in their field, that have studied the economy of this country and can come out bringing out statistics, bringing out facts, bringing out numbers, bringing out well-calculated digits, saying, you know what, this is what the Nigerian government, by the books, by our records, by our income, by our revenue, by our deficit, by our debt profile, by our exchange rate, by everything, this is what the Nigerian government can comfortably pay as minimum wage. Then we can expect, we can accept what that expert have done, because now you have seen his expertise in play and all of that. But until then, let this negotiation continue. The way they keep adding 2,000, 3,000, 1,000 is demeaning on a lot of levels, because it doesn't make sense. Let the senators earn 62,000 naira. But you know what? In the end, even if their minimum wage is 62,000 naira, we see their allowance, they will still go back home with millions of naira at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. But we keep saying that it's not our concern. We don't want key political office holders. We don't want the president to feel our pain. He's incapacitated. He's not in the position to feel anybody's pain. We want them to listen. And so far, they are not listening. They are not listening to labor. They are not trying to shift ground. They are not trying to do anything better from Nigeria, for Nigerians. And that is why we are where we are, because you know, currently, with the economic situation of this country, 60,000 is nothing. I'm expecting the federal government to do better.
I'm looking at it from this point of view. I mean, if experts are sensing danger, maybe they're sensing a danger in the fact that we're seeing governors already complaining, private sectors already complaining that they cannot pay above that. Reason why? Because if they are going to pay if they are going to pay this amount, that is to say certain people will lose their jobs eventually because they won't be able to do it. So maybe that is adding more number to the unemployed we're already having on the ground. So possibly that is a danger they are sensing. But just like you said, let us just try and look at it. I mean, at the bigger picture here. How much is the government being, realizing as revenue? We are going to be earnest. And that's why I keep saying that. I think the reason why the government is feeling choked is the fact that we have decided to, put our entire focus on oil, and we've refused to go to other sectors. We've refused to, mine other sectors, get more from other sectors. And that is why we feel like we cannot be able to afford to pay this certain amount. Because imagine if agriculture is giving us more. Imagine if by now our aviation is standing on its own. Imagine if other sectors, power and all of that, imagine we had more investors going into other, source of power, solar and all of that. So just imagine if the environment was conducive. You will see that Rachel will not have a problem. In fact, say that already the textile industry is beginning to produce certain revenue to the country. How about coal? So many other things we'll be able to do, but it's quite unfortunate that the only thing we can brag about as a nation is oil. And I say, God forbid it, but let's say tomorrow the oil wells are dry, what will become of Nigeria then? So let's just wait and see what this whole back and forth and even a danger is going to be. But I'm just, I don't want to say much. I just want to hear what the president is going to say about the new minimum wage. Well, that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, the big story, fuel food lead as import hits 12 trillion naira. Manufacturers import 1.5 trillion naira raw materials. Food import gulps 921 billion naira. Nigeria gets 19 trillion naira forex from crude oil, solid mineral exports, and others. Details can be found on page 2. Says work on total electricity subsidy removal, new tariff. Marketers register with Dangote Refinery ahead of loading. Details can be found on page 35. Minimum wage talks end today. Labour awaits Tinubu's nod. Reps to meet governors as Borno opposes state police. Details can be found on page 7. EU raises again visa for fee to €90. You can find details on page 36. On vandalism, federal government tightens security on third mainland bridge. Details can be found on page 7. Local refining may crash petrol price to 300 naira per litre. This is a report from the modular refineries. Police students 25 others abducted on Abuja Nasarawa Highway. On Democracy Day, federal government to hold parade, youth summit, and dinner. Details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at New Telegraph newspaper for the first quarter of 2024. Export to African countries surged 77.4% to 2.24 trillion naira. More detail found on the front page and on page 3. Naira devaluation pushes cost of fuel import to 2.6 trillion naira. Atiku to Sheitima, Tinubu benefited from my goodwill. Pray for president to succeed. Lawan urges Nigerians. You can find out on page 2 and 3. Nigerian carriers can compete with poor infrastructure, high operational costs. This is coming from the IATA. NDLEA intercept codeine shipments from India, US, UK born opiates in ladies' hair. Crisis threaten Labour Party's chances in Edo Guba election. More data found on page 9 and 10. Infrastructure neglect, we have poor investment, others liable for power crisis. Coming from expert, governors more interstate power collaboration. More data found on page 2 and 8. Federal government to launch 12 boats, water ambulances to curb accident. Serap sued Tinubu for failure to account for the ex-president's loan. You can find out on page 4. We will recall where Serap said the president should say how much was the debt he actually inherited from his predecessor. That's talking about Buhari. So you can do well to find more detail on what Serap is saying about that on page 4. And we have Mossop gives condition for oil production resumption in Ogini land. More detail found on page 3. And on minimum wage, governors, senator, reps should also earn 62,000 naira coming from Father Mbake, and also on Ajade. Detail found on page 4, 26, and 29 as expert advocate regional variations. And on Kaduna, bandits abduct Reverend Father as soldiers kill 5 insurgents. And downside, we have a study that says quality sleep can tackle loneliness. So if you are lonely, maybe you need quality sleep, and that can actually help you. And more detail can be found on page 27. We have a picture story. You can do well to grab the paper and see more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, Atiku tackles Shetima over claim on enjoying Tinubu's goodwill. Arrest Nigerian 19 others with illicit drugs. Police DSS Guards Brigade raid May 1 million bandits hideout in Kaduna and Abuja. The big story, anti-open grazing bill, Meiti Ala Pandev Ohaneze in fresh raw. Lawyers insist on proposed law. Farmers' headers crisis threat to corporate existence of Nigeria. This is a statement coming from CUPP. Details can be found on page 22. Omotekun commander wants outfit upgraded to state police. Kwara female pilgrim committed suicide in Medina. This is a report from the Saudi authorities. Declining investment in telecom sectors may affect remote banking services. Soldiers killing, army raids, IPOB's camp in Abia kills 6. Details can be found on page 27. Rising transportation costs causing surge of commodity prices in marketplace. Report from experts. Details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Metrics newspaper, Nigeria's trade surplus hit 6.5 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2024, says MBS, as France, Spain top export destination. More detail in the paper. And we have Peter Obi under fire over Nigeria, South Africa's election comparison. He lacks understanding of Nigeria coming from the Northern Group. You can find that inside the paper. Minimum wage governors, senators, reps should also earn 62,000 naira proposed by the federal government, coming from Father Mbaka. Serap sued Tinubu for failure to publish details of loan taken by the ex-presidents. And we have Tinubu political goodwill comment. Atiku fires back at Shetima. How I saved Tinubu's political career as Lagos governor. Says Shetima carried away with February of unveiling of his official residence. Reveals how he was nominated by all delegates from all the states. Still on the Metrics newspaper, Tinubu makes vital appointment at the Climate Change Council. Makinde approves Olakulehi as the 43rd Ulu Ibadan. You can find that in the paper. Governors Forum consider export-import of electricity between states. And as well, we can see the commissioning of road project. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Yesom Wike, alongside the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and other dignitaries at inauguration of the FCT road project in Guzape recently. You can find that in the paper. And we have the return of Buki Rights. You can find that. It's talking about entertainment. You can find that on page 14. And that's all on Metrics. But before we continue with other paper review, we would love to give you this time to actually digest the stories, ingest it, and then we can have your views of what you feel about the new minimum wage, various inauguration that are going on. What Father Mbaka is saying concerning maybe everybody need to earn the 62,000 naira, talking about the reps, senators, governors, and everyone as well. So when we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Hello viewers, my name is Amaka Ocheke. We anchor the program, The Living Room, right here on Equa TV International.
You are welcome to watch us every Monday.
The Living Room is a very interesting family program where we discuss everything you want to know about family.
Talk about our children's mental health.
Keep watching. Our program is always here, 5:30 every Monday. We want you to ask questions. We want you to phone in and drop topics that you want us to talk about, even on our media handle on Facebook. We're there. So keep watching, keep listening. The Living Room.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at some key stories that made it to the front page of the paper, talks on minimum wage, and also talks about various inauguration that took place in the FCT that rounded up in the weekend, and then quite a number of other stories that are on the front page. So we would love to hear your own views and also your own opinion concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thank you, Rachel.
Welcome, Sarah.
All right, we will continue with the paper review and we will look at the leadership at this moment.
The big story on leadership: electricity tariff, life-saving services threatened in teaching hospitals. You can find details on page 4. We pay between 2.5 and 4 million naira daily to discuss CMD's lament. Stakeholders seek special tariff regime for health sector. Lagos government switches hospitals to own power plant. Details can be found on page 4. And at the top of the paper, Zenith Bank Adaora Umeoji's new tenure as GMD sparks optimism. In Gaza, Nigeria backs Biden's ceasefire proposal. Details can be found on page 16. We have a fact check. What did farmers predict about food crisis in Nigeria? Trending, tribunal finds multi-choice 150 million naira. You can find details on page 2. National Assembly vows to protect 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery. On June 12, Atiku will be Kwankwaso to address democracy rally. Nigeria's trade surplus rises by 79% to 6.52 trillion naira in the first quarter of the year. Niger Delta ex-agitators beg for increase in amnesty stipends. Details can be found on page 22. Northern Elders seek National Pastoralist Commission. This is coming. You can find details on page 6. And we have Nigeria, U.S. discuss climate funding for green industrial push. Details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Tinubu approves mandate for special presidential envoy on climate action. The big story, no cause for alarm over Nigeria's debt profile, coming from expert, saying nothing will with obtaining loan if used judiciously for developmental projects. You can find that on page 3. Tinubu actually benefited from Atiku's goodwill aid, says Shetima goofed. You can find that detail in the paper. And on cost of governance, Aisha Yusufu wants Senate scrapped. You can find detail of why she wants it to be scrapped on page 6. Return artifact will boost Edo's tourism potential, coming from Obaseki. And we have Kanu Anti-Graft Commission probes alleged empowerment scheme fraud. More detail on page 3. We have this picture story here where we can see operative of the FCT Police Command with other sister security agency storm some identified kidnapper scam at Gidondogo and Kwiti Forest, Kaduna State, boundary in the FCT, and then arrested some suspects. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Daily Independent newspaper, Tinubu OK's mandate for special envoy on climate action, names Madukwe shelling others into climate change council. Northern Elders ask federal government to set up National Pastoralist Commission. You can find details on page 7. The big story, despite CBN assurances, 3 banks show signs of distress. This is a report from an analyst. You can find details on the front page and continue inside the paper. APC wins all seat in Yobe Council poll. Refrain from issues you know nothing about, Atiku tells Shetima. Naira devaluation impacting positively on export, a statement from customs. Details can be found on page 7. Owando contributes $550 million out of $925 million for NNPCL's Project Gazelle. Details can be found on page 6. UN group urges governments to take lead in education development. Lose Enugu's smart school, 33% funding for education. Details can be found on page 6. Serap sues federal government over failure to account for loans by ex-president. Troops eliminate 11 terrorists in Abia, Zamfara, and others. Details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Blueprint newspaper, Oyetola promises efficient inland water transportation. That you can find on page 6. Nikos secure release of 7 Nigerian pilgrims in Saudi. And on business, we have policy inconsistency, Naira pressure, threat to our economy, coming from Rwanda. And on the World Cup qualifier, Super Eagles seek first win against Benin in Abidjan. Detail found in the paper. Refuse to join us, get killed, terrorist gang threatening Niger youth. Slay 20 local unable to access their farms. Troops neutralize 10 in Kaduna community and Abe Forest. And this has been my fear and concern, the fact that it's ready the rainy season will be seeing resurfacing of these bandits and terrorists again. And here we are saying that it's either you join or you get killed. So I hope that the government of Niger State will do something concerning this issue here, make sure that farmers are safe to have access to their farmland. More detail can be found in the paper. A still on Blueprint newspaper, Serap goes to court demand detail of Obasanjo, Buhari and others loan. So that is from 1999 till date. Serap needs a detail of all the loan that was collected. Nigeria economy to hit $1.85 trillion inflation, and we have decelerated to 14% coming from the IMF. Federal government achieves 6.52 trillion naira foreign trade surplus of the first quarter 2024. NDLEA intercept codeine shipment from India and US. Kaduna State government nets 4 billion naira IGR in the first quarter of 2024. Kano government establishes clinic for pilgrims in Baka. You can find that on page 6. And on June 12, which is the Democracy Day, Arewa youth preach peace, condemn planned protests. More detail can be found on page 7, and that's all on Blueprint newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, completion of Dangote refinery has put to shame the distractors. You can find details on page 4, a statement by Akpabio. 21 years after federal government recovers 12.7 billion naira metering funds from local supplier. Sacked CBN workers false sack, seek reinstatement. Details can be found on page 7. NDLEA intercepts another large shipment of opioids from India, seizes illicit drugs in Lagos, Kebbi, and others. The big story, Lagos-Abeokuta Expressway repairs stall months after FEC approval. Angry commuters, motorists, others demand immediate action as road conditions worsen. You can find details on page 4. Troops secure major victories in counter-terrorism operations across Kaduna, Zamfara, and others. A report from the Defense Headquarters. Serap sues federal government over failure to account for loans obtained by ex-presidents. And that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Nature News. And on Nature newspaper, we have NCF, LBF advocate ocean conservation as equal Ilagushi beach cleanup. You can find detail on the front page and on page 10. Lagos government urges action against land degradation droughts. You can find that as well on page 10. And on climate change affect politics, economics, says the COP29 president. You can find that also on page 31. And we also have Dr. Madukwe replacing Dahaura as the DG National Council on Climate Change. Tinubu's ministers unveil climate action for Nigeria. And on food crisis, president set up committee on bread production in Egypt. We have the NAGGW Acrocell showcase performance on government mandate. And downside, we have Mercedes promises more win as Canadian Grand Prix. Detail also found on page 28. We have a picture where we can see the Minister of Environment and others during the World Environment Day in Abuja, a meeting that they had. More detail can be found in the paper, and that's all on Nature newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra 2026 World Cup qualifiers, Benin versus Nigeria. Eagles, beware of these Nigerians. You can find details on page 7. Arsenal end of Siemens interest on NPFL title race drama as Rangers Eyimba match abandoned after pitch invasion. Mbappe suffers back injury ahead Euros. Can Eagles peck Squirrels in Abidjan? These deals can be found on page 6. Onocha confident Eagles can beat Benin. Details can be found on page 6. Folding in line for record City contract. Shaw blames United medical staff for injury woes. Arsenal plot Diaz move. Chelsea suffer Alvarez transfer blow. Details can be found on page 4. Hen confident Joshua the boys will fight for IBF title. Olympics qualification thrills Adesina. Details can be found on page 3. Odiga eyes more titles with CSK. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on Point Sports Extra.
On Business Day newspaper, stocks defer rate hike to gain 15.25 trillion naira in 5 months. We have Garrigu Power, Dangote Cement, BUA Drive Rally, April-May performance show market losing steam. Nigeria sealed $1 billion deal on 5 power plant. National Council of Privatization to announce winners. Wando joins NNPCL Afreximbank crude oil deal with $550 million. From access to Sterry, Bank's new lending rates after CBN hike. So for those who bank with this bank, you will really love to know how these interest rates are right now. So you can do all to turn to page 30 and see what the new lending rate will be. We have Apabio says Dangote refinery has shamed Nigerian government, and we hope that this will be a challenge for the Nigerian government to do something by reviving all our refineries that have been lying idle over there. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On national economy, FX reforms vital for Nigerian foreign investment. Report from Fitch. U.S. lawmakers demand Biden secure release of Binance executive. You can find details on page 4. The big story, Nigeria's staple food prices surged by 141% in 1 year. Purchasing power of Naira dwindling, 5.9 million Nigerian children in severe food crisis. Deep Blue project as catalyst to Nigeria's maritime development. Details can be found on page 18. And then we have a table showing currency, what it's been bought and sold at for the US dollar, pound sterling, euros. This is the CBN exchange rate as at the 7th of June this year, 2024. And then we have Brent, gold, silver, and gas. And that's all the news on national economy.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me. And also thank you to our viewers and supporters. Thank you to the production team and every other person out there that made this program a success. We look forward again to doing this tomorrow. Please do have a blessed day ahead.